Ramananda ji, I'm glad we're doing this. We did a podcast, I think, during the early months of COVID, maybe online, but we haven't done one in person. So I'm glad we're here now. And I'm hoping to be able to capture some of your story, and thanks for being up for that. But I want to start by simply asking if there's anything that's really been present on your mind lately that's kind of held your focus that feels appropriate for this time or important for this time.
Yes. It came up with the group that I was teaching this past weekend, and with several groups that I've met with in San Francisco recently. Just the question of how does one respond as a spiritual practitioner, as a yogi, to this world that's so chaotic, to the current administration and some of the things that are distressing about what's happening in this country, and then to world events that are equally distressing or even more so. That's just has a lot of people really anxious, upset, frustrated, wanting to do something but not sure how or what might be useful. So that seems like an issue that has come up a lot. And we held a satsang specifically around that topic in early March, and we'll have another follow-up session in early May, just looking at that topic together. It came up with the group here.
So does it come up for you personally as well? Like, do you resonate with what other people are saying on a personal level?
It does resonate with me personally in the sense that I do believe in keeping up with what's going on in the world. And I don't obsessively read every article. I see the headlines. I try to get some objective, as much as possible, some objective view of what's going on. And I'm concerned about what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Ukraine, in Sudan, in the Far East. There's so many places where there's so much suffering and injustice. And so I'm concerned about that. I'm not finding myself being obsessively anxious about these things. And I think specific populations in the United States have a reason to be anxious because of either their work or their family or their ties to certain populations that feel threatened by the government, by this by events that are without precedent, at least in our lifetime, in terms of the way the government has moved to disqualify people from living legally in the country, has taken action against people who they feel are inappropriately supporting the regime that the government isn't in favor of, like people protesting against the war in Palestine. And then there's all the layoffs, and which seem sometimes to be very rapid and without a lot of thorough and mindful consideration. So a lot of people are either worried for their jobs or worried for people that they know. And so that concerns me. But these are the people that I want to support and provide any spiritual guidance that I can. So I'm involved in that sense, that I want to help think about a way forward from a spiritual point of view. And that's led me to be in conversation with other people, to read and hear from other leaders, especially spiritual leaders, and then to try to make space for people to have a chance to talk about it together, think together, and feel like they can be supported by their Sangha.
So I guess considering the original question of, how a spiritual practitioner manages this, right? An external world that seems out of balance or chaotic, or not the way that I would want it to be, what do I do?
Yeah.
What do I do? I mean, that's the ultimate question.
That's
what do I do about
question.
this?
Yeah. The ideas I can share have to do with not just my own thinking, but what I've been reading and discussing with other people. I mean, we all agree that it doesn't help us to get so upset that we can't function well. It doesn't help us to lose the things that keep us in balance, that enable us to maintain our balance, you could say, our equanimity. So to have a regular, habitual spiritual practice on a daily basis is a great foundation for dealing with anything that comes up in life. So I always recommend that someone have that as a very fundamental aspect of their spiritual life, a regular spiritual practice of some kind, ideally some meditation. And we all know that meditation is generally more effective, and if we do some preparation with some physical movement, some stretching and breathing, that helps calm us down in a more gross way, that enables us to then still the mind sufficiently to touch this place within us that is already a source of inner stability, where there is a foundation of steadiness, of peace, that can act as a source of guidance, or just as at least a home base to touch on. And from that place, it becomes much easier to then navigate what comes up on a regular basis, on a daily basis, if there's some sense of stability. The other thing we've been emphasizing is the importance of sticking together, of having a Sangha, having like-minded people to connect with, to speak about this, to support ourselves, especially when we get really upset about something. It's important to have support, to have a sense of safety, to be able to release those energies instead of bottle them up or repress them because they're not attractive or they're not socially so acceptable. So to have a support system that enables us to manage the powerful energies that arise when we're angry or upset or distraught is very important in my mind. And then, if we can, maintain our own balance, and that's what Gurudev taught. Before you think about making a difference in the world, keep yourself in balance, keep yourself in decent shape. And then you'll have a better chance of staying connected to this grounded being that we share and come from a place of care about the well-being of everyone instead of just what would be nice for you or those close to you.
I wonder about this last one, with Gurudev's guidance, and if that isn't maybe glossed over a little too quickly, and how important that is, right? That if I am out of balance myself, if I'm not well grounded, is it wise to be engaging in these different things?
Yeah. No, Gurudev was here in the mid to late 60s and into the 70s when the Vietnam War was still going on, and his devotees, a lot of them were interested in protesting against the war. And he saw them with all their anger and disdain for the government that was keeping the war going. he saw them bringing that energy into their protests, which were meant to produce peace. And he made a real point of pointing out to them that you're bringing this kind of energy to the promotion of peace. Is that how you pursue peace? With anger in your hearts. So same thing here. Just in so many different ways, Gurudev made the point of keep yourself in balance, make peace in your heart first, and then you can be a presence for that. You can't just pretend to be spiritually balanced and compassionate on the outside when you're engaging in the world. It has to be part of you, and that comes from a real effort to clean up your own act first.
Yeah. I wonder a little bit about even that as a method. To me, that definitely makes a lot more sense than, obviously being out of balance and engaging. All right, that doesn't seem like a great idea. But then also this concept of filling myself up, getting to a place of balance, and then engaging, on a more challenging level, right? Which maybe the notion a little bit is that, well, that's going to be so challenging and difficult that it's going to throw me out of balance again, and then I'm going to have to come back to myself in my own practice, fill myself up again, and then re-engage. And it's kind of this moving out and in. That makes sense to me. It does. But I wonder if there's even another way to look at it, and that is that it's all sadhana. That even when I'm engaging with the world, that's also something that my heart needs to do to feel a sense of purpose, right? And it's not separate from that. It's just a different flavor of sadhana.
Yeah, beautifully said. I totally agree. I mean, for sure, Gurudev's teaching also was that our engagement in the world is part of our practice. Karma yoga, you can call it that. He never wanted us to withdraw from the world and in the same way that you hear the sadhus go to the forest or go to the mountains and sit in a cave, he never wanted us to back away from the world and isolate ourselves and do intensive sadhana. He wanted our sadhana to be in balance, our formal sadhana to be in balance with engaging in the world, because he felt we would learn from both ways. And he made that very clear to us. And I think you're right. We don't need to wait until we get ourselves in perfect shape before we take action in the world. That's also not practical. We learn from both ways, engaging in the world, making mistakes, and learning from those mistakes and doing it better the next time. But it does take, in my mind, it really helps to have a regular meditative practice to just bring ourselves into some semblance of balance that gives us a good chance of contributing in a skillful way instead of just contributing more confusion.
Right. Or even in those times, I mean, I believe that even when I'm meditating, when I'm practicing, that energy, hopefully a very peaceful, loving energy, is radiating out into the world. So it's not even that is not doing anything. Right? We can't really quantify it, but I believe it's happening.
Definitely. I mean, Gurudev and many yoga masters, many saints have confirmed that same thing. And Gurudev, I remember him saying once that even people who have withdrawn from an engagement in the world, that are praying, that are doing their sadhana, I can't think of it. What do you call it when the monks or the nuns live cloistered? Those who are living in a cloistered life, even some monastic orders where they're silent. That those people praying and being a presence for peace in the way that they are keeping the world in balance in a certain way.
Yeah, I believe that's the case, 100%.
Yeah.
I also wonder, in terms of our relationship with the external world and what's happening, if it's important to also see how that is affecting of things. Like if I have the viewpoint that everything is in chaos and the world is kind of going downhill and it used to be better and now that it's worse, am I also contributing to that that continuation of those types of things to happen, as opposed to, acceptance that I don't understand why it's all happening, but I'm a limited human being. Like, it seems that the ego kind of can get really big. And I had a friend who said recently that he had a moment when he was witnessing two people having an argument, and he noticed himself really judging, like, oh, how immature they are, having this. And then all of a sudden a voice came into his head that said, this is okay in my world, is it okay in yours?
I like it.
And it's so hard, right? Because we see these things that feel totally unacceptable, but at the same time, what other path is there but to accept it? Because, I know a lot of people are saying now that this time we're living in is different. Of course it's different, but I can't ever remember a time when there wasn't giant problems in the world and it didn't feel like chaos. And I don't foresee a future where there aren't going to be monumental obstacles and challenges. So what can I do but change my relationship to them and come to accept them?
Yeah, beautifully said. Gurudev talked about that also. He talked about the world as a place that's cleaning us up, that calls for us to awaken up, to purify our hearts by exposing the darkness that's within us, by rubbing and scrubbing us, he would often say. He would give the analogy of the automobile factory where everything's getting worked on and all the clean, nice models, they're not there in the factory because they're already done. That the world here is a factory. It's a place. And that's led me to say in this way, the way I like to say it is, the universe isn't interested in smooth sailing. The universe is interested in challenging us to make us wake up. And so that's what we can expect. And the benefit of that is it keeps things in perspective. We don't need to be so distraught that the whole world is going to hell. As you say, there's always been injustice and suffering and challenges, and they seem to be getting worse in our lifetime. But part of that is just the fact that we're so much more well-informed now, that the media from all over the world can report all the bad things that are happening all the time. And they rarely report the beautiful things that are happening where people are taking care of each other and serving each other. So it's some of both. But I like the idea that if we have some faith that there is a higher intelligence beyond our limited understanding, that there is some purpose behind the events in our world, we don't need to let ourselves get lost in depression about the bad things that are happening. Accept them, cope with our own emotional reactions to them, keep our balance, and then contribute in whatever way we can. Many different ways, even if it's just praying, as we've said before. This reminds me of something from way back when I first met Swami Satchidananda. I met him at a teacher training program in 1976 at the Connecticut ashram, where he would give satsang, and we got to see him quite a bit. And at one of those satsangs, I asked a question. And the question that I asked that I said in the question that I have become, from being at the ashram, I've become interested in the possibility of living with other like-minded people at the ashram. That seemed really like a beautiful thing. But at the same time, I have been working in a runaway shelter for adolescents in Kentucky, and I felt also drawn to serving in the world. And his answer to me was really a wise one, along the same lines that we talked about, in that he encouraged me to think about whether I was capable of really contributing in a healthy, skillful way in the work that I was doing, or whether I needed more work on myself in order to be a better presence in the world, one that really embodied the spiritual values that I believed in. And I kept that question with me for the next few years. And after 3 more years of asking that question, I moved into the ashram. I realized I wasn't ready by myself to lead a life that really contributed in a meaningful way, and that I needed more work on myself.
Yeah, so let's rewind a little bit more even. If you can share where you were born and anything you know about your birth story.
Oh, wow, way back. Well, I don't know a lot of detail, but I do know that my father and another friend of his were in the Army together toward the end of World War II. They were both trained as doctors, and they served in, I think, in doing translation in Japan. But after they finished their stint in the Army, they together wanted to settle somewhere in the countryside in Kentucky, where my father had grown up. He grew up on a farm. And they found a small town called Brandenburg, Kentucky, right on the Ohio River, that had an aging doctor who was the only doctor in that area. And they established an office there, and he happily retired. So they took over being the doctors for that area. I already had, by that time, an older brother and 2 older sisters. And I was born there in my father's office, because there's no hospital in that little town. That much I know. My father, being one of the only doctors in the whole area, was a prized, what's the word I want to use? He was looked up to as a special person, and our family was taken care of. And he took care of the local people that he served in a beautiful way, and often they paid him with food. We all had handmade quilts on our beds from people that gave that as a payment for his service. And he delivered babies all over the county, by going to people's homes. He made house calls. So that was where I grew up initially, this little town with a cow pasture across the street from our house. But that little town also didn't have a high school. And as my brothers and sisters got older, he decided to move to the city, and we moved to Louisville, Kentucky, which is the biggest city in Kentucky, and finished my childhood there.
Any early memory that you have?
Just of climbing the fence into the cow pasture. Another early memory that stands out is being bounced on my aunt's knee while she sang to me. I don't know why that's such a strong memory, but stands out. Yeah, playing with my brothers and sisters was always a highlight. And I remember the hill that we lived on, in my mind, was this gigantic, dangerous hill where I would go on my tricycle. And many years later, going back, it was this little gentle slope.
How old were you when you moved?
Probably 6.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Can you share a little bit more about just the dynamics of the family, maybe the way that your parents parented?
That's an interesting. Yeah, it was unusual in my family in the sense that My father and mother are practicing Catholic. They didn't use birth control. They had children rapidly. But after 5 of us, within like 10 years, there were 5 of us, my mother died in a car accident. Just suddenly, my father was in the car as well, but unhurt. But she was killed. And so that's part of my childhood memory is my aunt helping to take care of us, and then another woman that my father paid to stay with us during the day while he worked. The result of that was that my brothers and sisters and I became very close. We played together a lot. We took care of each other a lot. Then eventually my father remarried. They had 2 more children. And we all stayed close. And to this day, I'm still very close to my brothers and sisters. And I'm sure that that traumatized me in certain ways as a 2-year-old to have my mother suddenly gone from the picture. But I seem to have worked through that. I think so.
Do you think that you learned in some kind of way about like impermanence? And did that change your relationship to life at all?
Yeah, I think, I was so young when that happened. I don't actually have any memories of my mother at all. Maybe it has. So a lot of what the way it may have impacted me was on an unconscious level. And I'm sure it influenced the way that it related to other people, and maybe fear of abandonment was an issue for me as I was growing up. Certainly struggled socially to want to feel accepted and loved, and like a lot of people do. I can't really pinpoint any kind of lesson like that about impermanence, but just the importance of I would say an issue for me was wanting to be cared about and loved. And that was something I had to grapple with and realize that I couldn't depend on winning the love of other people, as our culture kind of influences us to do. But instead I had to learn how to love myself and take care of myself. Respect my needs and capacity, and be at peace with who I am, myself, rather than looking for that from outside. So that became more of a lesson that seemed to come up again and again as I grew up.
So you even have like a memory of maybe realizing that you needed to care for yourself.
Yeah, no, that definitely was a theme that came up over and over and over again. I had a tendency to do more than was needed, to go out of my way to help other people, to take care of them. Maybe the way that I would have wanted to be taken care of, I don't know if it boils down to that. But I see that a lot of my behavior as a young man had to do with trying to win the love of other people as a way to feel loved. And I had to learn that's, first of all, you can't depend on that. And that I could be more respectful of my own limits and my own needs. That just came up over and over again, primarily by overdoing it, by depleting myself so much that I had to acknowledge that it wasn't working, that way of living, that way of thinking.
Is there anything else you know about your family history, grandparents or beyond?
That's an interesting question. Well, I know that my grandfather was a farmer. a dairy farmer, but he died in his early 60s. My grandmother, on the other hand, lived to 96, so she was much more prominent in my life. And while my grandfather was influenced by the typical prejudice of the areas where he lived in rural Kentucky, my grandmother was much more open-minded and compassionate and caring, and she was kind of the matriarch of our family as we grew up, and we all looked to her as the person of wisdom and faith and care. She kept in touch with everyone and loved everyone. So that was a beautiful role model for me. Yeah. Any other?
Many generations in America, or do you know if your ancestors coming from any other countries?
Yeah, my brother did some research on that. So not too far back in our family history, there were my grandmother's relatives came from France. My father's grandfather's grandfather came from Germany. So a few generations back, immigrants from France and Germany, and somewhere Irish was in there as well. But I don't know too much about those people and what they were like. But definitely they brought their own culture to the areas and that they grew up in and influenced us in certain ways. My original name was very Irish-oriented. Sean Patrick was my middle name, Patrick. They all fade into the background in a place where there were people from all over. Yeah.
How about yourself as a child? How would you describe yourself as a kid? What kind of a kid were you?
Yeah, a few different things stand out. One was, unlike many of the kids that I went to school with, I took religion seriously. I thought it was important. I tried to understand and believe and follow the Ten Commandments. I was raised Catholic. I tried to take it seriously and really understand it. Whereas a lot of the kids that I hung out with and played with didn't give it that much attention, and they were just bored with going to Mass and studying the Catechism. I remember distinctly feeling that it wasn't fair to expect us to believe in Jesus Christ and be devoted to Jesus Christ when we didn't get a chance to be around him in person. And I remember thinking the disciples were lucky because they got to be with Jesus, and that if I had that chance, I could probably be a good person too. I remember distinctly thinking about that and trying to practice what I was taught on the playground at school and with the other kids. But the other prominent thing that I remember about my childhood is I was crazy about sports. I loved sports. I loved playing anything. I wasn't that good at it, but I loved anything with a ball. And I did learn to play tennis and golf and played basketball and football and baseball with the other kids. And I was mad for baseball in particular as a young man, and eventually found my way into running track and cross country, simply because I wasn't good enough at any of the other sports, and that's the one thing I could do. So yeah, love of sports. Who knows why that comes, and to this day I follow the sports world. Anything with a ball. Though I don't have many Sangha members that are equally interested, I still find a lot of enjoyment in that.
You could talk to me. I'm the same way.
Okay, okay, good. Later we'll talk more about that.
How about socially? Was it pretty easeful for you to kind of flow through different dynamics? Or
Yeah, I think so. I was shy. I think I was a little socially awkward because I was afraid of being hurt and wanting to be accepted. But what helped me so much was being a part of a track team and cross-country team in high school, where I had a group of people that I really bonded with. We didn't drink, we didn't smoke, because we were committed to running year-round, pretty much. And so that became my social support group and worked really well for me. It kept me out of trouble. I didn't do any drugs in high school. Or alcohol just didn't interest me. So that made a big difference in my life. And by the time I got to university, I was really starting to seek wisdom and looking for something meaningful in my life. By the end of high school, I rejected Catholicism. There just wasn't anything solid for me to believe in. It was all just what you were expected to believe without any personal experience with it. I just wasn't buying into it. It felt too much like just some traditional way of being that didn't really, that wasn't a personal experience. That's all I can say. And many of the people that I went to high school with, a Catholic all-boys high school, felt the same way. So by the time I got to university, I was really looking for something more meaningful. And I hung around with older kids because I just didn't feel interested in the kind of party life that many of the kids my age were participating in. And I didn't have any direction. I know a lot of my friends were pursuing a career in one field or another, and I didn't have any interest in anything in particular. So I think I was, though I don't know it at the time that I knew it, I think I was seeking.
Was that stressing you out at all, like not knowing what you wanted to do and other people knew what they wanted? Did you feel pressure that you had to decide?
Not so much. Yeah, that's an interesting question.
So maybe you had faith even at an early age that you didn't know, but something in you knew that you would find it in the right time.
I guess I had a basic idea that I wanted to be of service in some way. I could say that. I knew, and so I was attracted to, like, maybe I could be a social worker. Maybe I could, be in some position where I could help people or guide them or serve them in some way. So that I had in my mind, but I didn't know how that could manifest. I don't remember feeling pressure. I had older brothers and sisters that were already on kind of a career path, getting married and having children already. And I just could see that didn't strike me as what I wanted. And my parents were, and this probably makes a big difference, my parents were accepting of the fact that I wasn't sure. And after 2 years of university, I dropped out and decided to travel. I read this book, On the Road, by Jack Kerouac.
I was going to ask if there was a particular book that maybe impacted you.
Actually, in university, there were 2 courses that I took that impacted me. The first was the poetry of Thomas Merton, a Catholic Trappist monk who transcended his Catholic tradition and really came to the place of experiencing, I would say, mystical experience. His writings bear that out. He ended up in dialogue with D.T. Suzuki, a Japanese Zen master, and found common ground with him. His poetry really transcended the Catholic experience, and I found that very inspiring. And he kind of led me to an exploration of the Eastern traditions, especially Zen Buddhism, because of these dialogues that he had. And the other course that really impacted me was a course in the beat poets. So I wasn't finding much meaning in philosophy, sociology, psychology. To me, it was boring, too much semantics, defining terms in philosophy. But in literature, I was finding a lot of meaning. And after I read this, I had this course on the beat poets, I decided, yeah, that sounded good to me. I dropped out. I went hitchhiking around the country. I traveled around the U.S. for about a year, hitchhiking and working here and there.
By yourself?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I ended up working construction in Vail, Colorado. I was making, minimum wage, doing labor in construction sites, but I saved up some money and managed to also spend a year in Europe hitchhiking around and traveling. And those were great experiences. When I hitchhiked out west, I ended up learning to meditate from a Zen Buddhist teacher at a place in Eugene, Oregon, and I began meditating there in 1974. That would have been, and I continued meditating regularly throughout the rest of my travels. But a major turning point for me was traveling around Europe. I met some French people and ended up traveling with them to the island of Crete and living there for about 4 months, living and working in a cucumber factory, and speaking French with them. And that led me to meet up with one of those French people had a sister living in Jerusalem. And I understood that if you could live on a kibbutz, you could serve there. And I was looking for those kind of opportunities where I could prolong my stay by working. So I showed up at her doorstep in Jerusalem, unannounced, and asked her to write me a letter of introduction to a kibbutz she had been living on, which she did. But she had another friend. There were 3 of them from Paris. She had another friend who was a yoga teacher, and that's where I took my first yoga class in Jerusalem in French, and that really got my attention. Then I did live on kibbutz for 4 months, and I practiced yoga from a book on the kibbutz. But I had the idea that I really needed a teacher. So after I finished that about a year in Europe, I went back to the U.S. and looked for a yoga teacher. And I was fortunate enough that there in Louisville, Kentucky, was one integral yoga teacher named Kumar Shapiro. And I mean, there were probably 3 yoga teachers in total in Louisville, Kentucky at that time, and one of them was an integral yoga teacher. So I took classes with him. I'm kind of going on here.
This is great. This is what I want.
Yeah. I took classes with him. He would teach a course for 10 weeks, and then there'd be a break, and then another course for 10 weeks. And I think I did 3 of those courses over a period of like 8 months. And then he decided to move with his family to live at the ashram in Connecticut. No more teacher. But he convinced me that if I really wanted to learn more, that a good way to do that was to take a teacher training program. And, I'm at, 22 or 23 at that point, and I'm barely started to practice yoga. I didn't feel like a teacher training program was appropriate, but somehow he convinced me that it was okay. So I paid my $500 and hitchhiked up to Connecticut and took a teacher training program with about 20 other guys and 20 other young people. A lot of us young people. And that's where I met Gurudev. That was 1976. And that kind of blew my mind, you could say, as we would say in those days. Because
what blew your mind? Just his presence?
Yes. First of all, yoga, before the ashram experience, yoga to me was mainly the asanas and the relaxation. I knew a little more from these classes I'd been taking that had pranayama. But, Lilias Folan was on TV and Richard Kittleman, and it was all about asana. And I didn't know anything about a guru or yoga master or all these other teachings. So I got exposed to this whole vast world of yoga in the teacher training program that I had no idea about. And on top of that, to be in the presence of someone who embodied these teachings in a way that I couldn't comprehend. Swami Satchidananda was bigger than life and just unpin-downable. His energy was so powerful. His wisdom was profound. He answered all my questions before I asked them, most of them. And so that for the first time in my life really gave me some direction. I knew that by that time I knew that I was seeking, and I knew that I was finally finding some answers. Especially when we explored the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. I felt like there were some really very clear answers there that answered a lot of questions that I had. And the whole interfaith emphasis of Swami Satchidananda also had a profound effect on me. I can remember in high school having a girlfriend that was, she was a Christian, but she was a Baptist. And because I had rejected Catholicism and my traditional faith, according to her Baptist religion, I was doomed for hell because I was a non-believer. So, that was kind of a unromantic dynamic in a relationship. But it raised so many questions about how is that possible that someone doesn't even know about Jesus Christ, or someone doesn't resonate with it, and they're out of luck. So this approach that all faiths ultimately originated from one source of truth, the light of wisdom, the light of truth, as Gurudev would say, that made so much sense to me. And it took care of a whole lot of questions about the way the world works and the way that people practice religion all over the world. Yeah, it creates a dynamic where we don't need to divide ourselves over religion. And I saw the importance of that as a young person, especially having traveled around the world quite a bit and finding so much common ground with people wherever I went, no matter what faith they were in.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is when you hear something that resonates with your own experience.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I lived beautifully on kibbutz, though I have no interest in Judaism and I didn't know much about it. But I could see that I shared the same kind of interest in taking care of each other and living by spiritual values as they did. And other people who were volunteers on the kibbutz were from Scandinavia or Western Europe, and they weren't Jewish either. and they may not have had any religious beliefs, but they were good people, and believed in the most fundamental spiritual teachings like compassion and kindness.
Did you witness Swami Satchidananda kind of begin to kind of craft or mold this emphasis on inner faith, culminating in truth is one, paths are many, or was that there from the very beginning? Like he already had it, but did he see that this was needed and develop more interest in exactly what you're talking about and make it more and more clear that this is a place for, really diversity and anyone who's interested?
Yeah, by the time I got involved, that message was already very strong, all very, very much a part of Gurudev teaching. I mentioned before that after 3 years of taking the teacher training program, actually, I could backtrack a little bit. When I finished the teacher training program, and it was during that program that I asked that question, Kumar Shapiro had moved to the ashram prior to my coming there, and he gave me everything to take over running the classes in Louisville that he had been teaching. So by age 23, I was teaching 3 yoga classes a week in Louisville based on the foundation he had created. But when I went back, I continued to ponder this question. I continued to work in the runaway shelter and do my best to live a spiritual life. And I saw how difficult it was. So I moved, after 3 years, I made up my mind and moved to the ashram and took pre-sannyas. But that you had asked about Gurudev's interfaith approach. It was already very much a part of the way he was teaching. And by the time I moved to the ashram in '79, he was already contemplating building the Lotus. He already had that vision. And they actually did a little work clearing an area in Connecticut on the property of one of his devotees, possibly thinking of building the temple there. But Gurudev had the vision that it needed a proper setting. It needed a place with a lot of space around it to really make it stand out. And I don't know, he had some kind of vision about that. So even in 1979, there was talk about moving to a bigger place. Carole King had donated land in western Connecticut that Gurudev didn't seem interested in using for that purpose. He was interested in a place that had a longer growing season, that wasn't quite so cold in the winter, and was looking further south. So I think it's even that year, '79, that he may have located the property here in rural Virginia, where the cost of land was low. There's a lot of natural beauty. There was potential for a long growing season for farming and raising vegetables. And we didn't have those cold winters like we had in Connecticut.
Right. I don't get the impression that it was maybe that hard for you to pull yourself out of kind of, mainstream, we call it American culture or whatever it is, of just, build a career, have a family, do this, which I think many of us that maybe arrive at integral yoga struggle with, right? To not be included. Yeah. Right. It's like that kind of the sense of tribalism, even when it's not clear what the tribe is, we still want to be included in that. But I get the feeling that for you it just felt very natural to pursue something different that was calling to your heart. Is that right?
Yeah. To some degree, that's right. Part of it was something I mentioned before, that I watched my older brothers and sisters get married, and I saw that spirituality would quickly become, and it did for them, a kind of minor aspect of their lives, because their lives were so busy with making a living, raising a family, taking care of the kids, and the buying a home, all of those things. I saw that from my brothers and sisters and from other people my age, and that didn't appeal to me. I was concerned that the search for real meaning and purpose in life would become relegated to something.
You did it for a few hours on Sunday or whatever.
Exactly, exactly. And I didn't like that idea. And when I took the teacher training program, I saw another way. That made a huge difference. After the teacher training program, I was committed to keeping up a regular practice, but I was still surrounded by my friends who, after work would go have a few beers. They weren't alcoholics, they were really good people, but they ate meat and they drank, and that was normal. And I tried my best to still be a part of that sangha that I had, and at the same time lead a yogic lifestyle, get up in the morning and do my meditation and my hatha yoga and eat vegetarian, and I found it difficult. And I went back, after I took the teacher training program, I went back every year to visit the ashram again, and that just reinforced how comfortable I felt there amongst those people with that way of living. So after 3 years of trying to make it work that way, and 3 years of continuing to study the Yoga Sutras in particular, I made up my mind. No, this is what I want with my life. This is more important to me. I even thought of married life as, and I understand differently now, but I thought of it as an obstacle to spiritual growth, because it didn't leave time for spiritual practice, study, satsang. Now I look back and I see that a married life with children is another form of spiritual practice. It's another path. And my brothers and sisters, many of them and other people that I know made good use of that path to learn non-attachment and selfless service. But back then, I didn't see it that way.
But you had this intense interest in spiritual growth, seems like, right?
I did, yeah.
Where did that come from? Like, why that? What do you think was driving you in that direction?
Just having those questions about what is the purpose of being alive? Why are we here? Those things were important to me. And when I lost any faith in Christianity to answer those questions, I think from then on I was looking and searching. And only when I ran into Zen Buddhism answered the questions to a certain degree for me, but the Yoga Sutras spelled it out even more thoroughly, more methodically. And then the teaching of Swami Satchidananda on top of the Yoga Sutras, his way of being, really showed me that there was another way. And for the first time, I felt like I had a clear idea of a real purpose for my life, that I could really grow spiritually myself, and I could become someone who could serve in the world in a way that was really meaningful, that I could learn to live with spiritual values in my heart, and contribute to something that was making a difference in the world. I think all of that came together. Wanting to do something meaningful with my life, wanting to contribute, and wanting to find a personal way to wake up.
In those moments, maybe when you received an answer that was of a high quality, and maybe that, the experience was a sort of waking up in that moment of the receiving the answer. I wonder if that's kind of the driving force, because that feels so right.
Yeah.
Like, yes, this is this resonates with me. This is true. And because it feels so right, I'm going to pursue this more.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I would say it that way. Every time I came to the ashram, was around the teachings, heard Gurdev speak. Every time I practiced meditation, hatha yoga, and selfless service, I just got another taste of what life could be like. And as you say, it felt so right. It was so fulfilling. Yeah, we all know how fulfilling it can be to have the mind get a little still so that you can feel this presence beneath all the busyness of the mind. But I also learned that you could get some of that same feeling of being in alignment with a higher power, with a higher will, through your service. And I could tell a particular anecdote about that. In the early days of my life at the ashram in Connecticut, my assigned work was in the kitchen, and I helped prepare the meals with someone else in charge. And one particular weekend, there was a special group of people there, and many of them had special food needs. So there was extra work in the kitchen. And I remember working much later than the usual time when I would be finished. And I heard that Swami Satchidananda was meeting with some of those people and that other ashram members were there. And I began to feel resentful that I was still working and that they were getting to be with Gurudev. And finally there was a break in the work and it seemed like I wasn't needed, and I wandered. By this time I was in a kind of foul mood, a dark mood, feeling sorry for myself, a little resentful, grumbling under my breath. I walked out in back of the ashram just to be alone with kind of a dark cloud over my head, as you can imagine. And I felt bad about feeling bad.
Right.
Because I could see that this wasn't right. But I was feeling sorry for myself and I couldn't quite pull myself out of it. And just as I came around the side of the building from the back towards the side, there was Gurudev all of a sudden. What I had wanted was to be around him and feeling sorry that I was missing that. And then suddenly there he was by himself, walking in a certain direction. And there he was, yet I didn't know what to do. I put my hands together in the way that we would out of respect, but I didn't say anything and he didn't look at me, though I'm sure he knew I was there. We weren't that far away from each other, but he just walked by. He never looked. And now I felt even more silly, like, okay, here he is, but I didn't have any words. I didn't know what to say or ask, and he just walked by. And that was just even more confusing. It just added to the complexity of my mood. But before I knew it, somebody saw me and called out, Brother Rama. I was in those days a pre-monastic. Brother Rama, we can't find something in the kitchen. Can you help out? I ended up back in the kitchen and back to work. There was more work to do, more things to do. And now I started to feel some relief from that kind of bad mood I'd been in, because I was doing something useful, and that felt so much better. And actually started to enjoy working, and I started chanting, putting some healthy energy in my mind instead of all that old feeling sorry. And my mood lightened up, and I was actually enjoying myself, and I suddenly had this realization, oh, this is what they mean by karma yoga, where you actually enjoy serving.
Yeah.
And that becomes something meaningful, and you don't need something special from outside. You just find joy in being of assistance to other people. And just as I was having that realization that this is what they mean by karma yoga. I'm experiencing it. I had the feeling, I was by myself in the kitchen, but I had a feeling that somebody was watching me, or there was a presence. I turned around and there was Gurudev looking into the sort of back door of the kitchen. He never said anything. He just was looking, and then he shut the door and he was gone. I thought, oh. So confusing. He had been walking by in another direction. I ended up back in the kitchen, and yet there he was, kind of noticing that moment, right at the same moment that I was getting a real lesson. And I somehow understood and still believe that he's behind so many of the lessons that I got, that he was there guiding my path, and he still is. So that was a profound moment for me. Again, no miracle. No, he didn't say anything, but it felt too much for just synchronicity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too much of what you needed.
Too much. Yeah.
I wonder about the importance of discoverability, because you've mentioned a few times of in Christianity it was very like authoritative.
Yeah.
Right. This is the way it is, and even within our own organization, right? Like if it's wise to really understand that people need to discover things in their own time, that even if you hand them the truth as clearly as possible, right? Like karma yoga is great, but if someone's not ready to see it, or they just need to discover that's essential. Yeah.
True. Yeah, I think you've said it very well. People need to grow in their own time. And that was a beautiful thing about the ashram. There were people there at all different levels of maturity. There was a lot of crude, in the early days especially, a lot of probably crude behavior, people sneaking out and going for ice cream in the middle of the night or pizza. People doing all kind of outrageous things, acting out in ways because they had, probably they were repressing some of their desires, right, and they had to fulfill them. But Gurudev allowed for it all. He allowed, and even some of the people that seemed kind of immature and selfish, sometimes he seemed to give them more attention. He let everybody be around if they could at least, be at least contribute in some way, or not create any big problems. Even some of the ones that created problems, he would let them be around. He didn't seem to mind that that individuals stirred things up and that there was conflict. He kind of laughed at that. But I like the idea that no matter whether you were deeply dedicated and had taken sannyas, or you were brand new and just inquiring, that everybody could be around at their own level and grow in their own time. I really had the sense that was accepted, primarily through Gurudev's way. He would rarely dismiss someone or kick someone out, even though someone was not liked by a lot of members of the group.
Maybe time for one last question. What do you hope the future has in store for you? And maybe also if you can just touch on aging at all. I think it's maybe something that people have some confusion about, or just how you perceive it and what you hope the future has in store for you.
Yeah. Well, for me, a regular yoga practice, asana, pranayama, meditation has really served me well. I don't have any major health issues. So aging seems to me just like it can be a natural process of accepting the limitations that gradually develop. I don't have the same energy. I don't have the same kind of fire in me to do as I did when I was young, and that seems natural. And it seems like within a community-oriented setting, there's room for older people to gradually slow down, especially if new people are continually invited in. And I think that's what's important in a long-term spiritual community, is to have people of all ages and have young people coming in even as the older people are stepping down. So the young people can be trained, they can receive all the guidance that they need to channel that young, vibrant energy, and so that the older people can gradually slow down. And that is happening for me in San Francisco. I hope it continues to happen that way, where I can do a little less. I can focus more on teaching, which is really fulfilling to me. And I don't have quite the same dynamic workaholic mentality that I had at one time, where I would put in such long hours. But I still find my work fulfilling. I don't wake up regretting what I'm doing. I love to do it because it's meaningful. And I don't see suddenly like retiring like one would from a job. I just think of it as a natural process of cutting back and focusing more on where I can really contribute in a meaningful way. Obviously, I can't do manual labor the way that some young people can, but I can teach, and that I love doing. So I hope that it can continue to work that way for me and for all the elders in our integral organization, to still be valued for what they can contribute, and allowed by the influx of young people to slow down, and there can be that healthy balance.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen. Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Sure.
I always appreciate our time together and your presence. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe how quickly the time flew by.
I know, right? I tried to tell you.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this content and think others might as well, please feel free to share and subscribe.